Hi, I'm Jen Blackmer. I am the playwright for the play Predictor, which is opening on December 14th here in New York City at Theater.
Great.
Yeah,
So I was just talking to Brian actually. He told me you started working on this in 2016.
2016. Yeah. And what happened was, so as a playwright, I look for and really respond to stories about women who have done remarkable things and because of circumstances or time or what have you, have been erased from the historical record or never put into it in the first place, right? And so in 2016, in the summer, there was this wonderful article with the headline, Can Women Be Trusted with Their Own Pregnancy Test? At that point, I had 3 kids and I had gone through a lot of pregnancy tests in my life. I was thinking to myself, well, what would of course. So I clicked on the link and I read the article, and the article was about Meg Crane, Margaret Crane. The short version of the story is that Meg invented the first version of the at-home pregnancy test in 1967. She was working for a pharmaceutical company, Oregon Pharmaceuticals in New Jersey, as a freelance graphic designer. She is artistic because she thinks like an artist. When she learned about the test and how it worked, she was able to envision something that nobody else had before, which is that the test was simple, it was straightforward, and it could be done easily, and it could be done by a woman at home in the privacy of her own house, of her own life, with the people that she loves and trusts, right? So that she doesn't have to go to a doctor's office. The test itself only took 2 hours back then. But by the time you went to the doctor, gave the urine sample, they sent it off, which is what they did. And then the test was run, and then it sat there for a little while. And then they would either call back with the results or sometimes even mail them. It could be up to a month before you found out. And by that point, you knew. So the test itself was a little silly in that regard. So, this thing that we had gotten used to using every day. I mean, women all over the world are using this and knowing what's happening inside of them. So I read the story about the controversy that Meg dealt with when she came up with this idea. The folks at the company were like, oh, it's too controversial. Oh, it's too political. Oh, it'll make it easier for women to have abortions. All of this pushback. And she persevered. The story was really incredible, and it really like struck a chord in me. It resonated with me very strongly. And so I reached out to my producing partner, Brian, who's producing the off Broadway production. He got in touch with Meg and convinced her that we wanted to do a play. And she had movie people reaching out to her, as you can imagine. But we were the first and I think only people that came to her and said, we want to do a play. And she's a theater lover. She's lived her entire life, done her entire career in New York. And so it was really interesting to her to do that. We got to meet, and over the course of the next couple of years, we did a bunch of research. She interviewed with me. We interviewed in person, on the phone. She did some things with me in writing, which were wonderful. And so the play was written and pretty much ready to go for production in 2019. Unfortunately, then 2020, there was a pandemic and it set us back at least 3 years. So in 2023, we were able to get the first productions off the ground.
Okay.
Yeah. And so now here we are.
Wow.
Yeah.
Great story. So how much input did Meg have into the play in terms of how did you decide what to include and what not to include? And
Yeah.
did she influence that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The play itself, I would say 92.7, I just made that up, is factual. So all of the events as they occurred in the order that they occurred are exactly what happened. And so what's so interesting to me is that the play is a comedy because as we look back on that time in history, a lot of the stuff that happened, we think is pretty ridiculous. Yeah. So we're at enough distance now from 1967, 68 that we can kind of laugh at it, but then not really. I mean, we're still in some of those places right now. But Meg and I worked together, and probably the most scared I've ever been in this process is when I sent her the first draft of the play.
Mm.
She read it and got back to me and said, "Well, I have a couple notes." And basically, it was just corrections of dates and times. So there's a whole lot of facts in here. And as you do with any sort of dramatization, we played with time a little bit so we compress the time. And then there are a couple of fictional characters that I've created to underscore the personal importance of the pregnancy test. And so those scenes are sort of scattered in there as well.
Fabulous. Wow. And was there any themes that you particularly wanted to highlight throughout the play? Or was it just the themes that were happening at the time? Or was there anything you kind of put more emphasis on than maybe it would have had?
That's a great question. I love writing plays that are set in historical times because they're still resonant today. And I'm always amazed at that, right? That one of the things that first resonated me with Meg's story was about how persistent she was, how brave she was during that particular time when women were just not, they weren't invited into conference rooms and boardrooms, and they weren't invited to pitch ideas. And she did it anyway. And so that is so, I mean, she was so brave. She was so resilient. And that is, of course, what we want, what we want from today. I mean, we want to work with bravery, resiliency, all of that, you know. So when you set a play in the past, we are, as an audience, in the present. And so we're looking at this past event through our lenses that we have today. And what is constantly amazing to me with audiences in this play is that they're so struck by how far we haven't come. If that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
That we're still having some of the same arguments today about bodily autonomy, about women's medical procedures. We're still having these same conversations today that they had back in 1967 and 68. So that is always amazing to me. And I think there are these themes and ideals of autonomy, of bodily autonomy, of knowing what's going on with us and how important it is for us. And the fact that medical science has always sort of normalized the male body. And so something like the convenience of a pregnancy test wasn't even thought about. Like, right? It took a woman and it took a female artist to go into the laboratory, learn about how the test worked, and then envisioned a way for women to know, and to know sooner. In the case of 1967, it was 2 hours. Now we know, what, within 30 seconds, 90 seconds, something like that. So it's really incredible, like the vision of that. And so I think the play, my hope is that the play is full of hope. And as we sort of think about the world the way it is now and how we're really moving backwards, there are so many incredible women out there like Meg who have wonderful ideas, who are persistent, who are resilient, who can see things differently, that if we listen to them and if we listen to each other, things can only get better for us.
Which scenes do you think were the hardest to tell?
Oh boy. There is a scene, it's actually a fictional scene, but it's based on some real stories from my family and also that I had heard about women who were pregnant in the late 60s or had suspected that they were pregnant and didn't have any options. That's really hard to wrap my head around. And to write a play, you put yourself in the mind and in the situation of your characters as they're trying to work their way through the problem. In those situations, just thinking about what was not available in terms of support or medical care, the idea that when a woman found out she was pregnant, oftentimes she would find out from a doctor who was super condescending and had very specific ideas about what she could and couldn't do. The fact that in those situations too, when women became pregnant, they could be fired from their jobs and often were.
And this is a time when being a single mother was very frowned upon as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so there was a lot of that and people just didn't talk about it. And so to be in a situation where you find yourself pregnant, in a situation where maybe you didn't even have a choice, and not being able to envision being a mother at that time, or even for health reasons. We forget that pregnancy is dangerous and so many different things can happen throughout. And as we have become more and more aware of what those are, we can certainly work to prevent those things from happening, but it's still not, 100% foolproof.
And that's still a problem that's going on today as well.
Absolutely. So those scenes were kind of hard to envision, I think. And really, when you are a playwright, you have a number of tools at your disposal, but at the end of the day, you're writing dialogue, right? So you're creating characters with wants and needs and goals and hopes, and thinking about what my hopes were when I was young in, my late teens, early 20s,
Yeah.
what the things I wanted for myself, and how easily that could just be stopped if you got pregnant.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the pill was, when did the pill start being used? Was it in the 60s as well?
Yeah, the pill was in the 60s. It was in the early 60s. So during the time Meg was working,
Yeah.
the pill was, I say available, but I'm going to put that in italics because it was only available under certain very specific conditions. You had to be married. You had to have your husband's permission to be put on the pill. So if you were not married, you couldn't get it. There was a bit of a black market for it, and some doctors who were willing to work with women. But again, it's about bodily autonomy. If, as a young woman, if I want to have sex, I mean, everything, all the roadblocks are up against you. And never mind that there are things you may want for your life. I think in Meg's case, Meg was a single professional woman. She never wanted to get married. She didn't want to get married. She didn't want to have kids. And she never did. Right. So I think part of why she was so persistent about this was just the simple logic that women need to know. You need to know if something's going on inside your body. You need to know, and you have the right to know. Yeah.
Definitely. And in terms of the casting for the play, were you involved in the casting?
A little bit, yeah. So off-Broadway productions are, there's a certain process that you go through to get a play off Broadway.
Yeah.
We have done, this is the 8th production of Predictor, actually, around the country. It's been done in Los Angeles, in Sacramento, California, and in Oregon. We did a production in Nebraska, one in Indianapolis, Rhode Island. So it's been kind of all over the country with small professional theaters. In most instances, I am given the opportunity to have a say in casting, but in a lot of those communities, I don't know the actors. If somebody auditions and the director wants to cast the person, I'm all for it. One of the joys of writing a play is when it's produced multiple times, you get to see so many different interpretations of what you've done on the page. That's really been the joy of the whole thing. And now that we're in New York, I was able to look at some of the audition tapes that were sent in, but our director, Alex Keegan, put together an amazing ensemble. They are so great. And I have learned over my theater career that the best thing you can do is trust the people you're working with. Alex has a vision, and you're going to see that vision tonight. The group she put together in the casting process is really extraordinary.
Yes. When you were writing it, did you always have Meg in mind in terms of as the character and the actual person, in terms of putting in her real personality into the actual character in the play?
Absolutely. Before I even wrote a word, we had the opportunity to meet and work on the phone several times. I had a ton of questions for her, obviously. I also had the opportunity to email her so that I could sort of look at the way she wrote and think about her voice in writing as well. So after I got to know her over the course of about 8 months, maybe longer, of research, the idea for the play and that structure occurred to me. This idea that Meg is truly the central character because she's the one with the problem, which is I have this idea, I need to get it implemented, and the world is against me, right? But we have an ensemble of actors, 3 men, 3 women, who play over 40 different roles. And so they, kick in and out of characters. They play chorus roles. They play individual characters who are part of the organon dynamic. I love this idea of playing with space and time. And as a female writer, as a feminist writer, that's something that I think women writers do really well is we play with the linear storytelling dynamic, that our experience of the world is different. So, how do we as writers think differently about storytelling? And so the play is structured with Meg's story is sort of the through line, but then there are dream sequences and flashbacks that are very much sort of 60s pastiche that set the time and tone for it. So once I learned about Meg's story, about her struggle, about what some of the key moments were, that became very clear to me that that was how the play was going to be built. And plus, I mean, she's amazing. So, of course, she's going to be our central character.
Why do you think it's taken so long for her story to be told?
We've talked a lot about this. There's a line in the play, and it says, because girls are taught from toddlerhood to be seen and not heard. And I have experienced this in my own life, in both the arts and in academia, because I'm a professor, that women are expected to play second, to be the nurturers and to be the helpers and to be the supporters. And Meg is incredibly smart, beautifully persistent, but also fairly unassuming in terms of her expectations of the world. She does not expect anything to be handed to her. And so I think because of that, because Meg is so giving, I think that she was okay with it for a while. But as she got older, she met her partner, Iris Sturdivant, through the process of building the test.
Okay.
And they worked together and had this amazing life together. And then when he passed away, things changed, right? That she was like, I've had this amazing life. I've had this wonderful experience with this man who is now gone. So what does this mean, right? And I think the key to it was in 2012, there was an article in the New York Times, and it was part of this ongoing series. And the ongoing series was called "Who Made That?"
Okay.
And it was this whole series of who made that Ziploc bag, who made this, who made that, right? All these things we use every day. And the author, the wonderful author, her name is Pagan Kennedy, sort of a historian of invention. Her research said that it was first done in the United States in 1978. And so that's what she put in the story. And then Meg, who lives here in New York, saw it and is like, wait, okay, so this isn't exactly what happened, right? So that was the catalyst for her. She saw that and she's like, all right, with the support of her family were like, you should really say something. You should really contact the Times. You should tell them what happened. And at first she was like, no, I don't think so. It's fine. But then the more she thought about it, the more she's like, no, I really do need to sort of take my stand. And at the same time, she realized that she still had some of the early prototypes. And so she took those prototypes to auction. And the Smithsonian bought one of the prototypes. And so it's now on exhibit. They verified her story, the whole deal. And so once her story was verified, then the author of the original story contacted Meg and said, so I found out all this stuff that had happened before. So why don't we tell your story? Right. And this was in 2016. That was the article that I saw. That's right. And so when I saw it as a playwright, I was reading the story of how this whole thing happened. And I was like, oh my God, first of all, this needs to be shared. Everybody needs to know about this woman, number one. Number two, it was a moment in time that was so important. And it was also this thing that we use every day. But the way it came into the world was so unusual and fraught and so much a story of this time, right? So anyway, that was what did it. Yeah.
I think it's amazing that someone basically had no chemistry experience came up with this, and now lateral flow is so common.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So she really did change the world.
And being able to, I'm an artist, but I've also loved science my whole life. And I was almost an astronomer. I was almost a physicist. So this idea of an artist being able to look at this problem that was very technical, which is how to take this lab test and repackage it so that people could understand it was so profoundly moving to me that, in fact, the gap between science and art is not that wide.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you so much.
You are welcome. I'm happy
Great.
to talk with you. And if you want more, let me know. I'm happy to